It's good to see everybody here tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank the Union County Association of Educators and the Chamber of Commerce for being our partners tonight in sponsoring this. I think it's always great when we can have an opportunity to talk about issues that we all are concerned about. Naturally, we're all concerned about the budget situation that's facing our nation, facing our state, and facing our county. And it's a universal situation. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about tonight are not just unique to Union County. They're situations that are happening all over the state and all over the nation. And I want to clear up a couple of things. I'm not here tonight to throw anybody under the bus or point any fingers. This is a problem that we all have to solve together and work together on. And so I think it's great when the League of Women Voters sponsor an event where we get the information out there, because a lot of times with rhetoric and dialogue and things like that, there's a lot of misinformation that goes around. I think it's always good to hear things straight and the information that we have. So I'm going to do my best to try to convey to you a very complex issue. School budgeting is very complex. I've worked in the district for 35 years. I'm completing my 35th year with the school district, and I've spent the last 7 years as superintendent. And I've worked at all levels in the school district, and the budget is always a complicated thing. And it seems to get more complicated each year. And it's hard for even school people that have worked in it for years to understand. So I know it's hard for the general public to understand. So I'm going to try to put it on a basis that we can all kind of relate to and understand to the greatest extent possible. I have my Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Dan Karpinski, with us tonight. Dan's been with the school district for a number of years, and he understands this stuff very well. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation to share with you, and this will help talk us or walk us through some of the slides and some of the information. I think it's always good when you look at a budget, you need to look at the organization that budget supports. What is that organization trying to accomplish? What's its track record? What's its goal? What's its vision? What's its mission? And so in looking at this tonight, I want to start out with that. So we just call this the Budget Outlook for 2012-13. And let's first look at what is the mission of the Union County Public Schools. And you know, a lot of organizations have lengthy mission statements that nobody can remember. That's not true in the Union County Public Schools. We have a mission statement, preparing all students to succeed, that really is ingrained within the culture of our school district. And when we say all, we mean all. We're trying and endeavoring to assist all of our students to be successful. And I think we're doing a good job in some areas, and some areas we need to improve upon. And that takes resources. It takes human resources and physical resources to accomplish those objectives. Here are some of the strategic priorities of the Union County Public Schools that support that mission. Now, these strategic priorities are aligned with the strategic priorities of the State Board of Education. I'm not going to read these to you, but first of all, we do want to have high-achieving students that have an awareness of what it means to be globally competitive in this day and age. We do want to have quality staff. That's administrators, teachers, teacher assistants, support staff in the schools. We want to have quality staff providing leadership in our schools. We want that to be done in a safe, orderly, caring environment. That's what we want to accomplish. We want to make sure that the children are taken care of. We always say, and I had my wife taught in the system for many years, and I had 2 children went through the system. And as a parent in the system, my objective, and I think the objectives of most parents are, do they go to school and do they learn something, and are they kept safe? I think those are the 2 primary things parents are focused on. So certainly we want a safe and caring environment. We want to make sure that we use 21st century systems to make sure that we're efficient and effective in our operations. And also we want to make sure that we engage our family, business, and community partners. And we're sort of doing that tonight by partnering with the community and getting our message out about our budget challenges. The focus in the Union County Public Schools in the last several years has been on globalization, and we are doing a really good job in that area of making sure our students are globally competitive. Innovation, make sure that students have access to technology, and we use innovative approaches in instruction. And we make sure that we have what the students need to be competitive in the 21st century. And graduation. We're trying to focus on getting every student graduated with a diploma that really means something that they can take into the marketplace, and they can take the skills that they've learned, go on to community college, go on to the military service, go to a job, go to a 4-year university, whatever they decide to do, whatever they decide to look forward to. Here are some of our successes. We have been recognized as a leader in global education. We're one of 14 school districts in the state that are part of the Global Schools Network. And we're recognized, and I won't go into a lot of detail on that, that's almost another presentation in and of itself. But we're doing a very good job in that area, and I'm proud of some of the efforts that we've made. We are ranked #1 among all the large districts in North Carolina on the percentage of our schools that make the adequate yearly progress. This is a federal measure that's part of the federal No Child Left Behind Act, and we're the #1 performing school district in the state with regard to that. We also are the #1 performing school district in the state in terms of graduation rate. 89.1% of our students graduate within 4 years. And that's the 5th overall out of 115 school districts, and 1st among the large school districts. And our goal is to be #1, period, within just a year or two. We're working hard towards that. Our students consistently score above the state and national average on SAT, and our class of 2011 was awarded $75.7 million in scholarships. That's a record, and we're very proud of that. Now, with that said, we've done this at a time when per pupil spending has gone down in Union County. We actually, and this is when you look at state, federal, and local resources, we actually are spending less per pupil in the last few years than we've spent in the previous year. We currently rank 107th out of 115 school districts in per pupil funding. There are only 2 school districts in the state, Union County and Catawba County, that are in the top 10 in graduation rate and in the bottom 10 in per pupil funding. And there are reasons for that, and there are reasons that we rank that way, but like I said, it only means 8 districts fall in that category. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dan. He's going to walk you through the next couple of slides and explain a few things relative to the funding that we receive from the state, local, and federal sources. Dan?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. If you don't mind, I'd like to shift this a little more comfortable to my right here. Essentially, what you see, of course, is the per pupil expenditure, and that's actual expenditures. You see the data through 10-11 because, of course, this year is not over. So when we get the numbers this year, we suspect that it'll be close and or slightly down from the previous year. What's held us together, of course, is some of the federal funding that has helped over the past couple of years. Is it just here to the right?
Yeah. Jump ahead. There you go.
And as you can see, at the same time that the dollars have been reduced, we have increasing enrollment. And bottom line is we've been growing at a clip of about the equivalent of about an elementary school a year. So 600 students doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. So our elementary schools were built for around 700 to 800 students. And of course, these numbers include the pre-K classrooms. Okay, we do have revenue. We have our sources of revenue here, and what Dr. Davis wanted to highlight here was we get most of our money from the state, of course. Secondarily, our county chips in 22.6%. We have a slim amount of county bond and notes. At one time, we had that piece of the pie was larger because we were building schools. That was a big part of our capital program. Well, that's dwindling. The bond money that we as voters voted in and said, let's build schools, is just about exhausted, and that's going away. You have your federal pie, which of course in 11-12 was larger than ordinary because of the EDGE jobs and our money, but you do see that was 10.1% of our budget. And then child nutrition and the after-school program. Those are unique programs in our school system because they're enterprise funds. They pretty much bring in money and they spend money. We try to do a break even on that. So bottom line is the fees paid, whether it's for lunches paid and or money received from the federal government for subsidized lunch, if you will, as well as in the after-school care program, money that comes in pays for the program expenditures. And then other is small grants. We do have a special revenue amount that comes from little grants from throughout state, local, and federal that are earmarked as special revenue. I can't explain it any more, but I could give you a list of detail if that would be helpful at some time. So that is our revenue in a nutshell. Oh, a little too quick. Now, where does the money go? And of course, this shows that we spent 66.5% of our money on instruction. It shows that instructional support was less than 1% or 0.4% of our budget. Fiscal and operation, that includes things like accounting, maintenance, transportation, all of your behind the scenes, getting kids to school, making sure that the buildings are maintained, making sure that children are fed appropriately, so on and so forth. Central administration, 1.5% of our budget goes to central administration. A lot of times you hear large numbers like, oh, $1 million. Well, if you look at $1 million in the context of what our budget is, sometimes the number seems larger than it actually is because you're dealing with 53 schools. We've grown. When I started back in the mid-90s here, there were 27 schools, and now there's 53. Well, all those schools come with a price tag, and that's the utilities, the water, the sewer, garbage. These things have gone up, especially when gas prices go up. Not only do they affect the pricing on our meals, or it affects pricing on everything, because the cost that the vendors pay to transport things to us, of course, goes up. And what do? They pass the cost of that to us. So what you see is capital outlay. Capital outlay is a very small part of the pie. It once was a lot bigger. Other support is things like nurses, guidance counselors, things of that nature. Once again, after-school program is only 1.4% of this, and child nutrition is 5.3%. Once again, part of our enterprise fund to run just like a business. And of course, our total budget is $351 million. The budget has been as large as $451 million. We're down, of course, significantly, not only because of loss of funding over the years of operational nature, but also the big loss for the need for capital dollars. Okay, before I move on, Dr. Davis did want me to talk a little bit about how we get our money from the state. I'm going to back up to here, because the state gives us our money in three different categories, if you will. They give it to us on a position basis, they give us on a categorical basis, and they also give it to us on a dollar basis. And of course, a position is a position. So the state will give us, for example, just a nice round number, they'll give us 1,900 teaching positions. And they don't care if we spend $40,000 on that teaching position or $60,000 for that position. They're going to pay for the position. Doesn't matter. When we talk about per pupil expenditures and how we're 107th out of 115 school districts in the state, one of the things that drives that number is the fact that, yes, our teachers are relatively inexperienced, so even though the state gives us credit for $55,000 per teacher, some of our teachers are making 50, 45, and that adds up into Union County not getting dollars, but the state pays for the position. So that's one of the big reasons that we are spending less. Of course, I would say, and I can I have a lot of data to support it, we also are operationally efficient, but certainly the amount we pay our people is less, mainly because of teachers being less experienced, but also there's data that supports that in general. Bottom line is we are not paying our people a whole lot of money in general across the board, and that's a big part of why our per pupil expenditures are down compared to the state averages. At any rate, then we also get money in dollar allotments, and dollar allotments would be things like central office. The state, out of that $197 million, gives us approximately $1 million for central office. Well, as you can see, when you look at the budgets in general, $1 million of $197 million is less than 0.5%. That's what the state gives us to run our central office. And then last but not least, you have categorical allotments, and that's for things like EC. They give you money for EC, exceptional children positions, exceptional position expenditures, and you have to spend it on exceptional children. AIG, you need to spend that money on academically and intellectually gifted students. ESL. There are some ways to transfer money from one state bucket to another. Those transfers, if you will, have been very restricted lately. And let me give you an example of that. You cannot take teacher assistant dollars and or teachers and move it anywhere but between teachers and teacher assistants. So there was a time where you can move some of that money somewhere else. Now the ABC transfer rules have been significantly changed to restrict where the state says you have to spend your money. But bottom line is there are those categorical categories that they tell you where you spend your money. And that is fairly complicated. That's where it gets complicated. Like we talk about per pupil expenditure, we talk about how the state funds us and how we have to maneuver all these funds to try to maximize advantage of the system, of the way that we're funded. And we believe we do a good job of it, but it is complex because the state's pretty much saying, we're going to give you these funds, but at the same time, you got to use it for specific areas. They do give you some flexibility, but that's limited. And then, I don't know, this is not in the PowerPoint, but I think it's important to know, lately, and it's happened over the last few years, the state says, okay, here's your $197 million, but you need to give me back some money. You need to give a discretionary cut. Now they're calling it LEA adjustment. Well, bottom line is, we have to hand back money, and that's been significantly increasing. 3 years ago it was $8.5 million. This year it's 11.5, and next year it's going to be 13.5. Well, that difference from 11.5 to 13.5 is $2 million. Well, what does $2 million buy? $2 million buys over 40 teachers in Union County Public Schools. So that's the significance of that $2 million. And we hope that the state can do something about that. Now, this is where I'm going to need a little bit of some cheat sheet information here. Dr. Davis came to me Monday and said we're going to do this presentation, and by the way, I think they need to know a little bit about lottery money. So I did some research. I was at the office late yesterday trying to get the best data I could, and honestly, the data that I have is as of the distribution of funds for fiscal year 2012. However, it talks primarily about the year end of 2010-11. So of course, they don't know exactly how that money is going to be distributed. You know, lottery proceeds are still coming in. But at any rate, when the lottery was originally put together, remember, I think we all talked about it, I think it was a big thing. Well, we don't want a lottery, we want a lottery, we think it'll help. We think that if we get a lottery, the school systems will get all this money and it'll be great. Well, I don't know much about the lottery because magically we still get funding from the state, and magically I don't know really how we get it other than one category. Excuse me, but let's explain here. The original distribution of the lottery funds. School construction, 40%, of course, we were growing, the state was growing quick. We needed to build schools, we did it, and we did it quick. Then we have need-based college scholarship, that was 10%, and then you have teacher salaries in pre-kindergarten at 50%. This is the distribution of it today. And as you can see, the big pieces of the pie that have changed are school construction is now not 40%, it's 24%. Well, where'd that go? Well, what they do now is, of course, break it up, and they say some goes to teacher salaries and some goes to pre-K. Well, that's probably about that 15% is what's really going more into pre-K and teacher salaries. That kindergarten dollars that we get for that, that's been helpful. We've had a More For program in Union County. I've been on the Union County Smart Start Board for years, and actually Union County Public Schools was the fiscal agent for More For. And we made a program that was really great. We had a lot of certified teachers in there, so on and so forth. And then last year it basically got dismantled and it really is going to private daycares now. But that's what that's going to, and teacher salaries. I mentioned about, I don't know how I get this money. The only money I really know about how I get is right here, and let me explain that. Once a quarter, I get this little piece of paper that says, do you authorize, or does the board chair of the Board of Education authorize to spend this money on debt service? And we pretty much have done that for years. That's nothing new, and that's the way we think is fair. Bottom line is, yes, the county has footed the bill for all these buildings. And right now, they're spending about $45 million on debt service. That's like your and I mortgage. You know, and basically, we have a $45 million payment each year for our building of the schools. So the thing about this school construction dollars that I'm talking about here, that only equates to about $3 million a year. So of the $45 million principal and interest payment we have for our buildings, the state gives us about $3 million on average for that debt service payment. Teachers, like I told you, we get teachers from the state. Bottom line is, I don't really see any more or less teachers. I just see the state gave me those 2,000 or 1,900 positions. So I don't know how they put the lottery money in the mix. But as I'll read for you, over the years, this is what this pamphlet says, which is put out by the North Carolina Education Lottery organization. And what they have said over the years, it funded the salaries of nearly 12,000 teachers in order to continue the goal of providing one teacher per 18 students in grades K through 3. Well, we're struggling to maintain those student-to-teacher ratios, quite frankly. It paid for 100,913 4-year-olds judged at risk, and those are through the More 4 program. And then it provided $711 million for 1,027 school construction projects and things like debt service, and that's what we use it for. And then last but not least, it provided college financial aid on a needed basis for 123,827 students. So that's where the lottery money goes in the state. And then, as far as I know, the biggest benefit to Union County that I see or saw over the years has been the $3 million that we give for debt service to pay off our yearly $45 million bill. Okay, here is what the lottery means to Union County. These are stated numbers from this brochure. They said that we get $5.8 million for teachers, 105 teachers, and this is for fiscal year 2011. School construction, 2.8. That number varies, but I think it's been hovering around $3 million per year, give or take. More 4, and I say in parentheses here, slots, $1.3 million, and it's 546 slots. Well, that 546 slots is children ages 3 to 5 that are going to pre-K that need some assistance, and we hope that this program, and the state hoped that the program was going to help these children get ready for kindergarten. So it's a More 4 program, of course, since the age of the students coming to us is, closer to 5 now. We had some children that were a little older than 4, but at any rate, it truly made an impact. Quite honestly, we had a great program. We have a great program with the Union County Smart Start. More 4 was and is beneficial, no doubt about it. It puts books in front of kids that don't even know what a book looks like sometimes. It helps them tremendously in getting the skills they need to enter kindergarten on a timely basis. And there is trends and data that shows that that has been helpful. Scholarships, of course, that goes to the UNC system, and that is $715,000 for this particular year, and 658 scholarships were awarded. So that's pretty much in a pamphlet, or I can give you the website to get more data on it, but that's how we get money for the lottery. But the most significant piece that I see is that debt service payment. And then I believe Dr. Davis is going to take over.
Thank you, Dan, for walking us through the technical part of the budget. While Dan was talking, we had two distinguished people join us. We had State Representative Craig Horn joined us. He was at another occasion. So Craig, stand up and be recognized. Glad to have you tonight. And we have Board of County Commissioners candidate Frank Akins, who's also joined us. Frank, good to have you tonight. I think everybody knows that this budget crisis hit us all in a big way in 2008. And since then, everybody's been having to tighten their belt and try to make ends meet. And that's been, the private sector and the public sector. And here's some reductions that we've made since that time. Our total employees have shrunk by about 10%. You see the number there. Our central services senior staff, people in leadership positions at central services, was at 31 in 2008-9, is now at 24. We reduced assistant principals by 11%. You see the number there. Teachers, there's been some reduction in teachers. We've tried to protect the classroom as much as we could. That's been difficult, but we've tried to do that. A lot of those positions that we returned to the state as part of this discretionary cut that I'm going to explain a little bit later were positions that were either unfilled or they were interim positions. In other words, we received them from the state, but we never actually put them out there. And what that means is people aren't losing their jobs necessarily, but class sizes are growing because you would have received a teacher. Let's say in a third grade where there's 100 kids, you would have had maybe 5 teachers and 20 students per class. Now you have 4 teachers and 25 students per class. That's the difference. And that's just an example I'm using, but there are certainly situations all throughout our system like that. K-3 teacher assistants were reduced by about 23%. Of course, I'll talk more about that later. During that same time period, if you include our pre-K enrollment, we grew by about 5%, from 38,554 to 40,359. And you see lots of different numbers for enrollment. That's a hard number to capture because you include pre-K on some of those accounting numbers, and on some you do not. You also, it's a 20-day enrollment. And schools aren't, schools aren't like you get your membership and that's it. That's what you got. You take a snapshot at 20 days, and that's what the number you work with. And typically, enrollment in elementary schools will grow throughout the course of the year, and enrollment in high schools will typically decline. Although we've worked so hard on that to keep kids in school, lower our dropout rate. We do have a very low dropout rate. And try to get kids to graduate. That we're not losing students like we were, but typically that was the trend in the past. We made other staff reductions that I didn't quantify, but we have made reductions in the maintenance department, in the clerical staff, in the schools and in central services, in child nutrition. We reduced the Master's and National Board Certification supplements. In our county, the state gives, if you're a nationally board certified teacher, that's a rigorous process you have to go through. And they give a 12% increase on your pay. And North Carolina is one, if not the leading, is one of the leading states. And Dawn, I believe you're a nationally board certified teacher, and North Carolina is one of the leading states.
We actually have the most national board.
So we're number 1 now, right?
In the country.
Very good. All right. I knew we were us and one other state.
Partly because we have
a 12% raise. Yeah, and that's a motivator. It is. But Union County made a commitment several years ago that we were going to be even better than that, and we, the Board of Education, made a commitment that we were going to give $2,000 on top of that as a local supplement to our nationally board certified teachers. Well, that's been reduced in the last couple of years. It's now down to $1,500 a year. And we have a supplement that a teacher can get if they have a master's degree. If a teacher has a master's degree and is nationally board certified, they don't get both those supplements, they just get one. But the state gives you a supplement for being nationally board certified, the 12%, and then it's a much smaller percent for having a master's degree. We also eliminated administration cell phone reimbursements. Our principals and senior staff all have our own cell phones, and we reimbursed a portion of their cell phone bill on a monthly basis because of the fact that they were using their cell phones a lot for school business. And so we reimbursed, and that was equivalent to about a teaching position a year. It was about $55,000. So that went away, and that's not received anymore. And so that saved the teaching position at the particular point in time that we implemented that about 3 years ago, I think, Dan. Yes, sir. Okay, here's what we're facing for this year. This is the potential situation for the budget deficit for 12-13. We're looking at an additional state discretionary reduction of $2 million. Now, Dan told you we already absorbed $11.5 million. What that means is the state uses all their funding formulas in all those categorical areas that Dan talked about, the teacher allotments, the monetary allotments, the position allotments, the categorical allotments, and they figure out what you qualify for based on your average daily membership, ADM. And then they say, okay, you have to give money back because the state has to balance the budget. And I'm glad I live in a state where they're fiscally responsible and you have to balance the budget. They're not like the federal government. They do balance the budget. And so that's a good thing. I think we as taxpayers should be thankful that we do live in such a state that has that philosophy. Well, because of this tremendous budget crisis that the state is facing, and because education is such a big part of the budget, it's unrealistic to think that schools would go unscathed. I mean, that's just not realistic. When you look at the size of the deficit the state is facing, it's about as realistic to think that the state could balance the budget without touching schools as it is to think we could balance our budget without touching the classroom. It's a very similar kind of thing from a percentage basis. But with that said, I'm not here to pontificate about that. I'm just here to tell you the story of what is. And what is this $11.5 million is going to grow to $13.5 million this year. The way things are looking. The additional discretionary reduction statewide is $74 million. Our share of that is a little bit north of $2 million. So it's going to grow to about 13.5 this year. In addition to that, and I'll skip that second bullet and come back to that. In addition to that, we are losing $7.6 million in federal EduJobs money. Now people might say, well, why did you bank on that? Well, we pursued a philosophy that we were going to use that as long as we could to save as many positions as we could in hopes that things would improve. Now we knew that it probably wouldn't improve to the full extent, but we hoped it would improve so we wouldn't have to bite that whole bullet. But we are facing now the EduJobs money, and the EduJobs money was one-time money from the federal government that it expires, has to be used by September 30th, 2012. So for all practical purposes, that money has to be used for this school year.
If I may add,
go ahead.
Dr. Davis, one of the things that came up rightly is, well, why did you use it on positions and now you have to get rid of those positions? Bottom line is, it's EduJobs money. We had to spend the money on jobs. So that was some misconception out there, and we certainly were prudent with that.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you clarifying that. So the $300,000 is what we figured at the time that we put this information together it would take to operate our buses for 5 additional days. You know, the General Assembly passed some legislation that we had to do 5 extra instructional days. We now have learned that we're probably going to get some relief from that. There's probably going to be a waiver provision through the State Board of Education, which we've applied for. And so we probably are going to be safe on that $300,000. So instead of 9.9, we're looking at a $9.6 million budget differential year over year. And so that creates the situation that we're currently in. Now the funding from Union County, the Board of County Commissioners and the county is currently undetermined this time. I will speak to that just a little bit, just a moment. But that's where we stand right now. You take the $2 million additional discretionary cut and the loss of the $7.6 million in EduJobs money, that's how you get $9.6 million less this year to operate with, or this coming year to operate with, than you have this year. Did everybody understand my math there? Okay? All right. Because of that, we really don't have any choice. You see the cuts that we've made in other areas. And you know, we might be able to go back and find some loose change in the sofa. But it's not going to make the house payment, folks. The house payment is $9.6 million. And so we've got to hit, just like the state can't balance their budget without hitting education, we can't balance our local budget without hitting the classroom. And we're at that point. We've tried and tried to hold off as long as we could. And so some of the scenarios, we're losing 177 teaching positions or a combination of 97 positions and 150 teacher assistant positions. No matter what we did, it's going to have an impact on the quality of education. And I think we know that and understand that. We did take a slightly different approach. And I told the teacher assistants that we were going to look at something pretty serious in this area that didn't know, when I met with them back in early March, wasn't clear at the time what we were going to do exactly, but I worked with the Budget Development Committee, which is a stakeholder group. Ms. Griffin, with local NCAE, was part of that committee. Don was on that committee last year as the local NCAE president. And we worked through that process and looked at what were our options, what could we do. And really our options were to cut teachers and see class size go up astronomically to the point where it would be intolerable, particularly at the middle and high school levels. Or scale back on teacher assistants. And so that's what we chose to do. Now, what we did is we have 53 positions, and on April 3rd, the Board of Education approved my recommendation to do this. 53 teaching positions. Now, these 53 positions are positions that we'll get and then give back. And so a lot of them either won't ever be put out there, so nobody will occupy them, or there'll be people that are currently in interim positions now and have no expectation of continued employment. What that equates to, though, is larger class sizes, because you got 53 less teachers than you would otherwise have. But it could have been much worse, because we could have had to go much deeper. Now, 53 teaching positions, remember what Dan said, that is a position allotment. What the state will do is they'll take those 53 positions and multiply by their average teacher salary and benefits, which is $56,100, thereabouts. Right, Dan? If you do that, that brings you to around $2.9 million. I'm talking in round numbers here. Brings you to about $2.9 million. Then we took 60%, approximately 60% of the K-3 teacher assistant fund, and that was about $11.2 million that we have for K-3 teacher assistants. And we're returning $6.7 million. If you add the 2.9 and the 6.7, there's your 9.6 right there. And so that means that we are losing about 60% of our funding for teacher assistants. Now that's a monetary allotment, not a position allotment. So we're taking that money, that roughly $4.5 million that's left, and we're giving that to the schools to let them make site-based decisions on how to use that. We're allotting that to them on an average daily membership, ADM basis, just like the state does when they fund us. And so we're giving that to the schools, and we met with the principals today, and I met with teacher assistant representatives this afternoon. I'll give you one example. Sandy Ridge Elementary School, they have $221,000 to work with. That's their cut of that $4.5 million piece of pie. And they'll stretch it as far as they can. And they'll probably have hired a lot of part-time people. They might hire some full-time people, but it won't be the same level of service that we've had in the past. And so that's kind of the tough spot that we're in. And so that's how we got to our $9.6 million discretionary cut. Now, the state may come back and they may find some money to help us. There may be some help from others. There may be some help locally. I don't know. That's all to be determined. If that happens, I think it does behoove us to look at, all right, we took it from the classroom, it needs to go back to the classroom. And I do think if I'm still superintendent, when that all unfolds, that's what I would recommend. So we'll see how all that works out, but that's kind of where we are with the state situation as things stand now. With the county budget, in 11-12, we were funded, our local county appropriation for operating expenses was $79.3 million. Now that is in addition to the roughly $45 million Dan's talking about to pay debt service on the bonds. All these new schools that we've built to accommodate this tremendous growth that we've experienced over the last decade doesn't come without a price tag, and we've had to pay for that. And so the debt service is going down a little bit. Dan, I think you said it decreases by about $1 million each year as you're paying the principal and interest comes down a little bit. But still, that's a huge burden for the county. It's a huge burden for the taxpayers, and I think we all need to recognize that. So the county has to furnish that as well as furnish this. Last year, for the first time since I've been superintendent, since 2005, we got zero money for capital outlay. Zero. We actually had to go into our operating expenses and make some additional cuts there. I think we made about $2.5 million in cuts. Part of it was cutting those master's degree and those assistant principals and things like that, those master's degree and national board supplements, to carve out some money that we would have to devote for capital needs. And capital, you're talking about things like maintenance needs and technology and transportation and things like that. Well, my next bullet says that. Operating expenses, to explain that, we get money for operating and capital from the local county government. Operating expenses, as you see, are things that are consumable, basically. Utility, fuel costs, materials and supplies. Capital outlay are generally things that can be capitalized. They're capital investments. They're things that are going to last. They're going to have some longevity to them. Vehicles, buildings, maintenance on those buildings, technology, other equipment that you might use that would be around for a while. The Board of Education is still considering its request from the Union County Board of Commissioners. My recommendation, my initial recommendation, was to request $8.9 million in capital outlay for this year. We have a comprehensive facilities plan, a capital improvement plan, a comprehensive facilities plan that we put together several years ago in working with the county. And we looked at our long-range needs as far as buildings and our capital needs. And so, in looking at that, we've had to abandon that because of the budget crisis in recent years. We haven't done anything with it. So I asked the staff a while back, I said, look, let's go back and let's look at that, dust that off, and let's look at that, and let's see what our priorities are. We need to make sure that we have our ducks in a row so that when we make this request, we're really asking for what our priorities are. And of course, they looked at those, and then there were some things that, you know, since that document had been created, some needs had arisen that had become higher priorities. So they identified the $8.9 million in needs from the county. So that was part of my request. In addition, I asked for $2.2 million in additional operating funds. That's 2.2 added on to the 79.3. And I based that on some of our increased costs. When you look at some of our fixed costs for utilities, for some of our costs related to locally paid employees, when you look at inflationary factors, when you looked at all those factors, that's where we came up with that number. You looked at the growth in our students. All those things went into the mix. Now, the Board of Education has directed me and the Board Finance Committee to go back and look at that number. We by law, have to submit our budget request to the Board of County Commissioners by May 15th. And so we will be meeting prior to May 1st to work on that and then take that back to the board on May 1st for their vote. So those numbers are very much subject to change. They could go up or down. The sentiment of the board, particularly on that operating number, that 2.2, was to look at that number going up. But again, that is a Board of Education decision, and that's something that will be looked at, and we'll bring it back to the board. That pretty much is it in a nutshell. I do want to say this. We've got a very good Board of Education. They care about the children in this county. They care about education. And my senior staff are hardworking people, the staff in the schools. We've got great principals and teachers and people that support what we do and work with the children. We're not a perfect organization. No organization our size would be. But I think you should feel very proud. This is a good school system. It's not a good school system because I lead it. I just happen to be fortunate and blessed enough to lead a good school system. It's a good school system because of all of you, because of your support for the schools, because of the parents' support for the schools, because of the outstanding teachers we have in the schools. It's really something to be proud of. Now, I think there's two major reasons that and they're kind of fundamentally in conflict with each other. The two major reasons I think this county's grown so quickly is we do have good schools and we have relatively low taxes when you look at other counties. And sure, that's what we want. We want our cake and to eat it too. We want low taxes and we want good schools, and that's what we should hope for. But the citizens of this county should feel very proud of the school system we have, because all of you are a part of creating that. No matter what your role is and what your station and place in life is, no matter how old you are, with your grandchildren, or you don't have any children in school at all, you're still a taxpayer, and the dollars that you pay in taxes go to support our school system. So, I do want you to know that not only is it a good school system in terms of what it produces, and I think the proof is in the pudding with that, it is a fiscally responsible school system. In spite of the things that you hear, and I accept the fact that when you're in a large district like this, that there's going to be people that, don't think that you are being fiscally responsible. And that goes with the territory. I understand that. Just like I think many of these elected officials understand that it goes with the territory that people aren't going to agree with everything they do and say. But with that said, I think everybody right now is just trying to do the best they can. I'm going to be honest with you. And I wish we could just calm the rhetoric down a little bit and be problem solvers. You know, this is Union County. And the word union means work together. And so, you know, I'm all for us figuring out a way to solve these problems and move forward. It is a situation that doesn't have any easy answers because the state is strapped for cash, the county is strapped for cash, and certainly the school system is. And so it's very much a situation where there needs to be dialogue between people that is meaningful and has a problem-solving approach to it. If you look around in many of our buildings, you'll see that I have 5 core expectations of our employees. And being problem solvers is one of those core expectations. And being positive in your approach is one of those expectations. And so I would hope that that would be the approach that we could take. I don't have the answers. I wish I did. And I'm not here to propose we do this or do that. I just am here tonight to give you the lay of the land on where we are, kind of how we got there, what we've done to try to deal with it, and how we're still trying to take, even in these challenging economic times, and to provide a quality education for all the children in Union County, which is our responsibility.